My fiancée takes her daughters out to dinner and mini golf and leaves my daughter alone. Even though she promised to babysit, but my daughter still had to tell me the rest of the stuff. To give you some context, I'm a 39-year-old single dad to 10-year-old Dorothy. Dorothy's mother left when she was only 3 years old and never cared for her daughter again. This means she didn't make any calls, didn't send any cards, nothing. My ex-mother-in-law, Carol, has been a great help in raising Dorothy. She lives about 15 minutes from here and has always been available when I needed care for my daughter. 4 years ago, I met Michelle, 37 years old. She has 2 daughters, Emma, 15, and Zoe, 12, from a previous marriage. Michelle shares custody with her ex-husband through an unusual arrangement where she has her daughters from January to June, and he has them the rest of the year. When we first started dating, Michelle was amazing with Dorothy. She filled the role of the maternal figure that had been absent. Dorothy accepted her immediately, and for more than 3 years, everything went well. Michelle and her daughters moved into my house last September. It is a 3-bedroom house, not very big, but comfortable. Dorothy has had her own room since she was little. I've tried to keep things stable for her, especially since her mom left. She's always been a homebody, spending time either with me or Carol. Until recently, she had never been alone for more than an hour, and that was rare. I usually just went out for quick shopping during the day. The problem started in November, about 2 months after Michelle and her daughters moved out, after we got engaged. Michelle approached me about room arrangements. She wanted her eldest daughter, Emma, to have her own room, which would mean Dorothy would have to share a room with Zoe. Michelle argued that since Emma was older and only lived with us half the year, she deserved her own space. I didn't agree. Dorothy had always had her own room in this house. This was her safe space, her territory. My intuition told me that making her give up her room and share it with someone she barely knew would make her feel displaced in her own home. I tried to explain this to Michelle, but she didn't seem to understand why I was giving it a hard time. Eventually, we dropped the subject, but I could tell it was still bothering her. Things were tense for a few weeks, but seemed to calm down as the holidays approached. Last weekend, everything changed. I was unexpectedly called in to work a 12-hour shift on Saturday. This happens from time to time. I work in emergency maintenance at an industrial plant, and when something breaks down, I have to go. Usually, when this happens, Dorothy goes to Carol's house. But this time, Michelle assured me that she would take care of Dorothy, so I didn't call Carol. When I got home around 9:30 p.m., I found Doro sitting alone in the living room watching television. He was still wearing his pajamas from that morning. When I asked him how his day had been, he just shrugged. It was then that I noticed the takeout bag on the coffee table in front of her. The container was completely cold. I asked Dorothy where Michelle and the girls were. She told me they had gone out and told her they would bring dinner home. Later, when I spoke with Michelle, I learned that they had gone out to dinner at a restaurant and then to play mini golf. They had left Dorothy alone at home for at least 5 hours. I waited for Michelle to get home. When she arrived around 10:15 p.m. with her daughters, I asked to speak to her privately. I told him I thought it was absolutely crazy that he would leave Dorothy alone and not even think about taking her on a family outing, especially when I wasn't home. Michelle immediately became defensive. She focused on the cold food, saying that Dorothy could have heated it herself and that she didn't expect her to eat it cold. When I continued to press her about why she had left Dorothy, Michelle turned it around and asked me why it was okay for me to go places alone with Dorothy. I explained that in the months since her daughters moved out, my outings alone with Dorothy had included a trip to the grocery store and a visit to the vet for Dorothy's cat. These were necessities, not fun family activities like dinner and mini golf. The discussion ended with both of us frustrated and without resolving anything. That night I slept on the couch. The following week was awkward. Michelle and I barely spoke beyond what was necessary for the running of the household. The girls noticed the tension, but we tried to keep things civil in front of them. Then Friday came. Michelle was going to take Emma and Zoe to the dentist for their 6-month checkups. As they were leaving, Michelle made a comment about whether she hoped that wouldn't offend Dorothy. She also said it in the most sarcastic way possible. I told him what it was, childish and inappropriate behavior, and she responded by saying that I was being ridiculous about the whole situation. We both also said things we shouldn't have said. Later that night, after the girls went to bed, Michelle brought up the subject again. She told me I was being completely unreasonable for arguing about her taking her daughters out. She explained that since she could only see her daughters for 6 months a year, she wanted special time alone with them. He accused me of not understanding the difficulties of shared custody. I understood it. What I didn't understand was why she agreed to babysit my daughter and then left her alone. Then Michelle said something that really bothered me. She said her daughters might feel alienated from their own mother if they couldn't enjoy time alone with her. He added that because of the age difference between Dorothy and Emma, there would be many occasions where Dorothy would naturally be excluded from activities. I told her I understood her desire to spend time alone with her daughters, but she wouldn't have agreed to babysit if she wasn't going to do it, and if she did, she would have at least taken her with her. I also made it clear that if I expected our relationship to work, I needed to treat Dorothy like one of my own daughters. Michelle completely dismissed my concerns. He said he didn't understand her point because he had never dealt with shared custody. What bothers me most about the whole situation is not that Michelle wanted time alone with her daughters. Before living together, she took them to amusement parks, water parks, and other activities. Sometimes Dorothy and I joined them, sometimes we didn't. That was fine before. They were two separate homes. And when her daughters were with their father, Michelle, Dorothy, and I did things together with occasional date nights when Dorothy stayed with Carol. But now we're supposed to be one family under one roof. What really bothered me was that Michelle chose a weekend when I was working to exclude Dorothy. There will be many weekends between now and June when I will be home and able to take Dorothy out or stay with her while Michelle does something with her daughters. The timing seems deliberate. And why didn't anyone tell Dorothy about mini golf? She only knew that they would bring food home. I feel like Michelle was trying to hide the full extent of the outing from Dorothy, which makes me question her intentions. The more I think about it, the more worried I become about Michelle's treatment of Dorothy. If he's capable of this kind of behavior when I'm not around, what else could possibly be going on? I can't have someone in my house who treats my daughter like an afterthought. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post, but things kept happening from the next day. To clear some things up, my daughter has been left home alone a few times. We live in a safe neighborhood, but it's always during the day and only for a few minutes while I go get milk or something we need. Never for several hours, and even less at night. And if that doesn't seem like a big deal to you, why do you leave your children alone for longer? There's also the fact that Michelle shut her out when she promised to look after her. But let's go back to what happened the next day. Michelle and I tried to have a calm conversation about the issues between us. I explained to him again why I was upset that he had left Dorothy home alone and excluded her from the family outing. I thought we were making progress when Michelle acknowledged that she could have handled the situation differently, but quickly added that she still felt justified in wanting special time alone with her daughters. I suggested again that we could coordinate separate activities on the same day so that we could all have special time without anyone feeling left out. Michelle seemed reluctant, but agreed to try. The following weekend, I planned to take Dorothy to the Science Museum. She wanted to see the new dinosaur exhibit. I told Michelle about our plans 3 days before, suggesting that she might want to join Emma and Zoe that day. He said he would think about it. The morning of our trip to the museum, I went to wake Dorothy and found her already awake, crying into her pillow. When I asked her what was going on, she showed me some text messages from her friend who lives across the street. The friend had seen Michelle and her daughters at the mall the previous afternoon. They had gone shopping and to the movies. Michelle hadn't mentioned this outing to me or Dorothy. When confronted, Michelle didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she said, "I didn't realize I needed permission to take my daughters shopping." Again, I said no. But since I had tried to include everyone on a family outing, he could have at least told me. That weekend, after our trip to the museum, I took Dorothy to Carol's house for longer than usual. I needed time to think, and Dorothy clearly needed a break from the tension at home. Carol noticed something wasn't right and asked me what was wrong. After explaining the situation to her, she offered to let Dorothy stay with her more often if we needed it. By the second week, Michelle stopped pretending to try to fix things. He started going out more alone with his daughters, often without telling me in advance. When I asked him where they were going, he gave me vague answers like out or just to buy something. The breaking point came last Wednesday. I came home from work to find the house empty except for Dorothy, who was doing homework at the kitchen table. Again, Michelle had offered to babysit after school, and I'm writing, offered, because I didn't ask, hoping that's her way of working things out. At least this time it wasn't night. She told me that Michelle had left around 2:30 in the afternoon, saying they would be back for dinner. It was almost 6 in the afternoon. I texted Michelle asking where they were. She replied that they were at the Emma volleyball game, which had apparently been scheduled for weeks. It was the first time I heard about this. I asked her why she didn't bring Dorothy, and Michelle replied that she wouldn't have had fun anyway. When they finally arrived around 7:30 p.m., I noticed they had stopped for ice cream afterward. Emma was still finishing her cone. Of course, there was no ice cream for Dorothy. That night, after the girls went to bed, I told Michelle we needed to talk about our relationship. I explained that her behavior was creating a hostile environment for Dorothy, who was feeling increasingly unwelcome in her own home. I told him I couldn't continue in a relationship where my daughter was treated as less important than his daughters. Michelle immediately became defensive. She accused me of trying to control her relationship with her daughters and said she didn't understand the pressure she felt during the months they were together. He claimed he was trying to make up for lost time. I pointed out that he seemed perfectly capable of including Dorothy in activities before we lived together and asked him what had changed. He hesitated in his answer and finally said that living together was different and more complicated. When I pressed him on why living together should mean treating Dorothy worse rather than better, he finally admitted something that left me speechless. He said he resented that Dorothy could stay in her own room while his daughters had to share. He felt like I was prioritizing Dorothy over her daughters, so why wouldn't she prioritize her daughters over Dorothy? Michelle was essentially admitting that she was deliberately excluding a 10-year-old girl, all because of a disagreement with me about rooms. It was mean and cruel, and it completely changed the way I saw her. I told Michelle I needed some space to think. The next morning, I called my boss and asked for 2 days off. I packed suitcases for Dorothy and me, and we went to stay at a nearby hotel. I texted Michelle telling her we needed some time apart and that she should use that time to figure out if she really wanted this relationship to work. During our stay at the hotel, Dorothy and I had some good conversations. Without directly criticizing Michelle, I asked her how she felt about our living situation. Dorothy admitted that lately, she felt like she always had to tread carefully around Michelle and her daughters. She said she missed the way things used to be when Michelle brought her little gifts and helped her with her homework. We returned home yesterday. Michelle was surprisingly calm. He said he had been thinking about everything and realized that we could not continue living together under the current circumstances. He suggested moving temporarily so we could all have a safe time. She mentioned that she would look for a small apartment for herself and her daughters until June, when they returned to their parents. Although part of me wanted to work things out, I felt a great sense of relief at his suggestion. I told him I thought that would be best. She started looking for apartments online immediately and has some showings scheduled for tomorrow. So, that's what's happening now. Michelle will be moving soon. I'm not sure what this means for our long-term relationship, but right now all I'm worried about is Dorothy. It's my priority. The engagement is effectively on hold, although neither of them has officially ended it. I'll update when Michelle finds a place and moves in. Thanks again for all your support and advice. Update 2. As promised, here's the update, even though it's been a month. Michelle moved 3 weeks ago, finding a 2-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes away. Emma and Zoe share a room there, which is ironic. The move itself was tense but civilized. I took Dorothy to Carol's house for the day to avoid any potential drama. Michelle had arranged for some friends to help her carry the essentials, and I helped with some of the heavier furniture. By nightfall, they were settled enough for their first night in the new place. Since then, our communication has been minimal, mostly text messages about practical matters like mail arriving for her or coordinating time so she can pick up more of her belongings. Michelle suggested that once things calmed down, we could try dating again, living separately, but maintaining our relationship. I told him I needed more time to think about it. 2 weeks after moving in, Michelle asked if Dorothy could join them for dinner on Friday night. I had my doubts, but I didn't want to impose my wishes and preferred to ask Dorothy if she wanted to go. When I asked Dorothy about it, I wasn't surprised when she told me she didn't want to go. He said he felt weird now. I told Michelle that Dorothy wasn't ready for that. Michelle didn't take the news well. He sent me a long text message telling me he was trying to make things right and that I wasn't doing my part. She accused me of turning Dorothy against her and alienating her and her daughters. I was going to answer, but before I finally did, other things happened. Carol called me worried. He asked me if I knew about the conversation Michelle had with Dorothy last month, shortly after the mini-golf incident. When I told her no, Carol explained that Dorothy had barely told her. According to Dorothy, Michelle had pulled her aside one morning while I was in the shower and told her that she needed to understand that her family comes first. Michelle apparently explained to Dorothy that when her daughters were with them, she should stop causing drama and stay quiet. It should be noted here that I have tried to include his daughters. Because if we were all living under one roof, we should at least try to do some things together. She told her that she wasn't trying to be mean, but that Dorothy needed to grow up and stop expecting to be included in everything. Dorothy hadn't told me about this conversation because Michelle specifically asked her not to, saying it would only cause problems among the adults and make things worse for everyone. She told Dorothy that sometimes girls need to have girl secrets. I called Michelle and asked her about the conversation. At first, he denied it had happened, but when I insisted, his story changed. He admitted to having a little chat with Dorothy, but claimed I was exaggerating. He said he was just trying to help Dorothy understand the complications of blended families, but that she had misinterpreted everything. I ended the call by telling him I needed to rethink everything about our relationship. The next day, I went to her apartment when the girls were at school. I took off my engagement ring in front of her and told her I couldn't marry someone who would treat my daughter that way. Michelle cried and apologized, saying she had been overwhelmed by the changes and hadn't handled things well. He asked me for another chance. I explained to him that my daughter is a priority to me, and I can't be with someone who doesn't show her the slightest respect, that I had tried to accept her daughters, but she wasn't doing the same with mine. I told him I wished him the best, but that our relationship was over. As I was leaving, Michelle's behavior changed drastically. He said I would regret this decision, that I was throwing away something good for nothing. She stated that no other woman would tolerate a man who always puts his daughter first. I told her that I didn't always put her first, but I wasn't going to put her aside for a woman who, before being her boyfriend and fiancé, was a father and wasn't going to neglect that responsibility. He didn't expect her to be a mother to Dorothy either, but he wasn't going to tolerate her treating her like an undesirable part of the house. Then I said goodbye and left. When I got home, I found that Zoe had sent a message to Dorothy asking if he hated them now. This broke my heart. The children were caught in the middle of the adults' problems. I helped Dorothy draft a response saying that she didn't hate anyone, but that she needed some time. I also suggested that maybe they could still be friends at school. They attend different schools, but participate in some of the same district-level activities. That night, I sat down with Dorothy, and we had an honest conversation about what had happened. I explained to her that Michelle and I weren't going to get married and that they wouldn't be living with us again. Dorothy looked relieved, but also sad. He asked me if I would still see Emma and Zoe from time to time. I told him we would figure it out, but this time it would be different. The last week has been quiet. Little by little, we are returning to our routine as a family of two. Dorothy seems more relaxed, laughs more, and invites her friends over again, something she had stopped doing with the recent changes. As for me, I'm processing a mix of emotions. Disappointment, because the relationship I thought had so much potential ended like this. Anger, at how Michelle treated Dorothy. Relief at having discovered this side of Michelle before I got married, and gratitude for those who encouraged me to stand up for my daughter. Update 3. I've been hesitant to post again after more than half a year of not doing so because I wasn't sure if there was anything relevant to share. Life has largely returned to normal for Dorothy and me. However, recent events prompted me to write this update. After ending things with Michelle, I focused completely on rebuilding stability for Dorothy. We redecorated her room, something she had been asking to do for a long time. We returned to our old routines and spent more quality time together. Carol remains a constant presence in our lives, often joining us for Sunday dinners. At the end of June, Emma and Zoe returned to their father's house as planned. Michelle texted me to let me know they were leaving and asked if Dorothy wanted to say goodbye. Dorothy decided she did want to see them, so I took her for a brief visit. It was awkward, but civilized. The girls exchanged contact information, although, as far as I know, they have not been in regular contact. During the summer, Michelle occasionally reached out with attempts at reconciliation. He sent me messages explaining how he had reflected on his behavior and realized his mistakes. He asked me to meet him for coffee and talk. I declined these invitations, maintaining that my decision was final. In August, I received a call from Michelle's ex-husband, Brian. This was unusual, as we had only met a few times and had never spoken privately. He wanted to meet us for a beer, saying he had something important to discuss. I know this sounds like I'm not into drinking coffee, but it's a beer. Yes, but that didn't influence it. It was just curiosity. At the meeting, Brian revealed that Michelle had been criticizing me to mutual friends, claiming I had unreasonable expectations and that I eventually left her because I couldn't handle her daughters. Even more worrying, he had told Emma and Zoe that I had prevented Dorothy from having a relationship with them, painting me as the villain in the situation. Brian only found out about this when Zoe got upset when she tried to text Dorothy and didn't get a response. It turned out that Dorothy never received the messages because Michelle had changed the number. Brian apologized for getting involved, but said he was concerned that the girls were being used as pawns. He mentioned that Michelle had displayed similar behavior during their marriage, often creating conflict between him and the girls when she was upset with him. She wasn't saying this to speak ill of her, but to warn me to be attentive to Dorothy's well-being. I appreciated her sincerity and assured her that I had no intention of preventing the girls from being friends, if that was what they wanted. We exchanged contact information for the girls and agreed to facilitate some occasional meetups between them when they returned to Michelle in January. Last month, almost exactly a year after Michelle and her daughters moved in with us, I received a certified letter from Michelle. Inside was a formal letter of apology, along with several pages of reflections on his behavior. He wrote that he had begun therapy to address his insecurities and his pattern of prioritizing his needs over those of others. He didn't ask for reconciliation this time, he just acknowledged the harm he had caused and took responsibility for his actions. He sent her a brief message thanking her for the letter and wishing her the best on her journey. That was the extent of our communication. As for Dorothy and I, we're fine. Dorothy started 5th grade with enthusiasm and joined the school science club. He still mentions Emma and Zoe from time to time, usually when something reminds him of them, but without the anxiety that characterized those conversations in the past. I've started going out again very casually and without introducing anyone to Dorothy yet. Now I'm more cautious, but not closed to the possibility of finding a partner who truly respects the bond I have with my daughter. Carol remains a very important part of our lives, stepping in whenever necessary and providing Dorothy with constant feminine guidance. I've often wondered what things would have been like if Michelle had taken on her role in Dorothy's life with the same selflessness and generosity that Carol demonstrates every day. The room that briefly belonged to Emma and Zoe has been converted into a guest room and home office combo. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that you can't compromise when it comes to your child's emotional safety. No relationship is worth it if you have to watch your child shrink away, feeling unwelcome in their own home. Update 4. This would be the time when Emma and Zoe would return to the city to spend time with Michelle, and Dorothy would take the opportunity to share with them. But the girls' father has been granted full custody, and they will now live full-time with him in the other city. This does not prevent them from maintaining at least a virtual relationship. Dorothy has been writing to them, especially Zoe. Now, with what happened and what I discovered after a call from Brian, the girl's father, to tell me that his daughters would not be coming. There had been some disagreements between her and Michelle, which led to Michelle attempting a move to gain full custody of both daughters. I had been texting Zoe that if she told a little, quote-unquote, lie about her dad, she might come back early to see her. Zoe had wanted to return to the city to see some friends, besides Dorothy, which Michelle took advantage of. Zoe wasn't supposed to talk about this with anyone for the time being until the right moment came, but she mentioned it to Emma, and she spoke to her father. Eventually, Brian used that to ask for full custody of his 2 daughters, as he had the evidence on Zoe's phone. Now Dorothy is a little sad about the outcome because she just wanted to see the girls, but now we are planning a trip to their city, since it is an interesting tourist destination and will serve as a way for my daughter to meet them. Michelle and I haven't had any further contact since what I mentioned on another occasion, and given the events that happened, I'm glad I didn't. Comparing what he tried to do with Brian with what he did with me and Dorothy, it seems like it was something quite mild. So, that's it. A small update to this story.